You can see the levels don't connect. And there's very little water down there.
So this is what came up on the scan.
This is a 3D animation of what came up on the scan.
Yeah.
With just a little bit of water, not a lot down there, and it's underneath. But that's 82 rooms you're looking at, and 1.5 kilometers of passageways.
Wow.
That's 9 acres.
And sorry, which pyramid is this? Which area is this located in?
Hawara, 95 kilometers south. Is that freaky or what?
Wow, if that turns out to be what it is, what it looks like, that's one of the biggest finds they'll have in Egypt for a long time.
Atlantis rising from the ashes of those eyes that burn, that burn from the ashes of those eyes that burn by the filling moon to the Blue River Delta.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Whitehead, and I'm here as well with Chris Russak. We are Modern Knowledge. Our website is modernknowledge.ca, and we are bringing some groundbreaking knowledge to you today, speaking with the lovely Dr. Carmen Boulter once again, following up with her on the interview that I was able to do at our Vancouver stop of our recent event, Disclosure Canada. And Carmen, you've got some incredible things happening behind the scenes. This is something that is happening right now, and you've made some huge discoveries and some huge insights about what's going on in Egypt. And let's maybe kind of refresh for people that are watching this interview for the first time. What's happening? How did this discovery come about? What is the discovery? And then let's dissect it bit by bit.
The Hawara Labyrinth has been known over time, all the way back to Herodotus in 450 BC. And he talked about this complex that had 1,500 rooms on 2 different levels, a total of 3,000 rooms. And then over the centuries, Pliny and Strombo and all these different people have talked about it. And Sir Flinders Petrie in 1881 went and did a full dig and found a whole Roman level, and then a Ptolemaic level, which is Antony and Cleopatra's time. And then there's 2 more levels below it. So in archaeology, older is deeper. Now, there's been teams, a Polish team, a Belgian team, that were doing work up until 2008. And they went to the site and did ground-penetrating radar by laying the wires right on the sand. But no one had done space archaeology on it. And so this is a completely new technology, a completely new way of being able to look through layers and go all the way down, 6 kilometers down. And so Klaus Donner and his company out of Germany and Vienna have developed this software application that goes on the live satellite feed, and it's working with quantum physics and standing columnar waves, so longitudinal waves and Maxwell equations. And that's all to say that it's similar to barcodes. So what you see, how the information on a barcode at the grocery store will give all the information about the product. It's similar, in the layman's terms, that's the simplest metaphor to go for in terms of how this works. Now, most ground-penetrating radar, there's lots of different applications out there, but nothing is like this one. Because what this one can do is it looks through the layer. So the other ones, if you hit something, that's it. If there's something underneath, no can do. They can't see it. And so, but the other thing is that each element, each anomaly has its own pattern, logarithmic pattern. And so they do a scan for pottery. They can tell the difference between pottery, water, precious metals, precious jewels, bone. Okay? And so each of these have their own characteristic signature. So the way that this technology has been used is governments will call up and say, well, we need water. They did one for California, and they found two underground rivers at 160 meters and 170 meters, something like that. But they found water in Zimbabwe. They found diamonds in Brunei, gold in Bolivia. But mostly when they find stuff, it's just like 5 deposits. They can do oil and gas, but they don't want to because of the environment, and they'd rather turn their attention to things that are more useful, for humanity. So this technology is phenomenal, and Klaus Donna's friend has developed this particular one. So there's other space archaeology that's being done, but not like this.
So, and when was this particular, I guess, discovery? I mean, it's been discovered in the past, as you said, but not to this level. When was this recent scan completed?
Christmas Day. So I found the coordinates. See, that's the other thing, is that the team from before had the driving directions, but they didn't have the coordinates. And so I have been looking for this place for 25 years. And so I started thinking that these chambers would have been under the Giza Plateau. And I spent 5 years going down under the hole. And then there was this picture, an image that had been sent to me. It's actually on my website, of this trapezoid shape with a circle in the middle. X marks the spot, and something that looked like a pyramid. And so in February 2012, I led an expedition into the open desert, again, looking for this place. Like, I've got the sense, in the past life memory, that there's something that has this huge space that's very, very deep and very, very old. And so we went in with a Russian scientist, Dr. Konstantin Korakov, a crew from New York, a film crew, and a hot air balloon, and found the place. And we had to fly in there. It was a military zone.
Wow.
With unexploded landmines. Couldn't have been more dangerous. I mean, this was a real adventure. And then we got there, landed badly because it was late, bumped around on the desert, and then went walking to this place and went, oh, it's falling apart. It's modern. And they had literally built a concrete pyramid, and the Air Force was using it as a target for their pilots that were practicing. So we measured the energy fields on the Earth, and they were all wiggly still, even though it's, could have been many years since they'd used it. And so that was just to say that was a dud, and that was 3 years ago. So, okay, that's not it. Giza's not it. I wonder where this place is. And so somebody sent me a link, and I had seen it before. This thing is the image that is known for the labyrinth, and if you look at the center of it, and it's the legend is it's all at once a labyrinth, a brain, and a pyramid. And so it's my conviction that these are multidimensional ideas, signatures, symbols, about biology and cosmology and astronomy and archetypes along the edges here. And it's, it hasn't been deciphered. And this was a copper engraving that was done in 1670. So since 2008, when the ground penetrating radar was done, and I do have an image of that scan as well, that was really low resolution. And it just looks like blobs. Colored blobs, but they made a big announcement and said that they had discovered it. But we have to understand that there's methodology involved, and if you have a scan, high definition or low definition, it's the hypothesis.
Right.
And
yeah.
you need to go to the field and get the verification. So it was premature for them to say that they had discovered it. But pretty much now when you investigate, everybody knows there's something down there, except Zahi Hawass. He says there's nothing there.
Well, we're going to prove him wrong. And then you come in and you've got this advanced form of a scan. And if I'm correct, you're working on this with Klaus, and he was basically the connection to getting the ability to do this scan, right?
That's right. But the thing is that because we've been talking for a couple of years, the other contracts that he's gotten that use this scan, they actually go to the country and dig and say, here it is. And so for things like finding water, they can see the flow rate of the water, the amount of water. And that's why this is really important for places like California. And so there's validity and reliability in the scan. And so in quantitative research methods, which I taught at the graduate level at University of Calgary for years, those are the two buzzwords. And so validity means you're actually measuring what you think you're measuring. So in psychological tests, not very likely, likely, those Likert scores, I mean, they force everybody to say 3 because they don't know what the question means. So those don't have a lot of validity because you're not measuring what you think you're measuring. And then reliability is if you do this test over and over and over again in different places, you'll come up with similar results. And so this test is turning out to be, this scanning technology, they're calling it spooky accurate. Okay. Now, we don't know if the government's going to give us permits and let us go excavate. And at the great depth that it is, we don't know if we can even go get it out, right? So it may be that we're left with the virtual reality and that we don't verify it. Like that's iffy. Like just because this is a major discovery that could help people, give hope, change, be a game changer for how we see ourselves, because of the extreme antiquity of it, that doesn't mean that we're going to get the chance to do it. And so that's why I think it's important to really, start thinking about what it is.
Before we get into the details of the discovery, Carmen, I just wanted to orient the viewers as to the approximate location that you're speaking about and that you're going to be showing us about. You mentioned before it's south of Cairo, so if everybody's familiar with the Nile Delta leading out to the Mediterranean Sea. Cairo is at the base of that delta. And where is this location relative to the Giza Plateau in Cairo itself?
It's 95 kilometers south, and it's beside the Fayum Oasis.
And
which is right here. I'm showing you on the map right here.
So is that an artificial lake to the northwest, I guess, of that oasis, or is that?
It's not artificial, and that's actually a good question because there are ancient maps that show a displacement of water, and it's called Lake Moeris, Moeris, and it's about a 45-minute drive from this pyramid, and we went there, and it's this enormous salt lake in the middle of Egypt.
Oh wow!
Yeah. And so that is just mind-boggling in itself. But apparently, this is so old that the legends are talking about 2 pyramids in the lake, but on a little island. And some people think that the water went all the way to Giza. Whoa, what about the Nile? And if the Nile was covered, I mean, if you think about the Pyramid Code and time and the geological movement of the river and all that stuff, how old are we talking about here?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of speculation and a lot of unknowns that go with it. But I think that we are speaking because of the depth, and it's 30 kilometers from the Nile, which is, the Sphinx is 8 miles from the Nile. And so, and we've already examined the extreme antiquity of that, through the Pyramid Code. So we are talking old here.
It's almost like that lake there has basically been cut off from an ancient water system that was once connected to a greater ocean. Let's say it's like a landlocked salty sea of one sort or another.
Right, and so research into geology, the geology of the area, is all important in terms of, coming up with some final conclusions about this.
Okay, wonderful.
So what at this point is happening right now? Just sort of a quick little synopsis. Right now, you're in the talks with trying to see if they would allow some kind of excavation or further research, or is there going to be more scans, trying to be done to get more accurate data on this, or where does this stand now?
Well, the final report, will have the details, but there's an instrument that they bring with them that is more accurate than the other things. And so we are proposing to do boreholes into the key rooms that have, I'm putting it out there, there's 6 rooms that apparently have gold. And so we can say X marks the spot and drill the borehole and send a 3D mapping camera in to show the whole thing. And I suppose we could do virtual reality with that, whether or not the excavation happens.
And that's just amazing that you can actually do that nowadays. And that's a very unobtrusive way to actually explore an ancient site without doing too much damage. The small borehole, and then using that camera there to see what's there instead of ripping the whole thing out of the ground.
Well, and these cameras exist, and again, this is the new technology is what's helping us do all this. But it's not an excavation if you don't excavate, if you don't go. And so archaeology is a destructive science. And so the only entity that gives permits to excavate is the Supreme Council of Antiquities. And they meet every 8 weeks, and there's a committee, and there's protocol. And they need a principal archaeologist and a secondary archaeologist that are linked to major universities. And so we would be principal investigators. And you have to have qualifications to apply. So, you know, you can't just call up a university secretary's office and say, hey, I want to do a PhD, okay? Yeah. And like, well, I don't have a master's or a bachelor's, but no problem, right? That's not how it works. You know, applications are very, very long, drawn out processes where you fill in all the different categories and then you make the proposal. So, you know, we're proposing cultural heritage and visitor center and marketing and all that kind of stuff, but also all the virtual reality apps and all of that. And the documentary being made as we go along, all of that is on the table. And so the step, though, is even though we've got this scan, it could be just like Google Earth, 5 meters off or something. And so there's a device with an antenna, and you walk on the ground, you connect with the scan from before, and you say, here. But the trick is the depth, because none of the other stuff that they did before actually is showing that. And so their scans even say somewhere between 5 and 12 meters. And so this was the most sophisticated technology they had then. 8 years ago is a long time in terms of technology. So newer is better and older is deeper. Those are our little buzz phrases.
Well, do you want to take people on a little journey? I know you have a bit of a 3D, you got the 3D mapping there. We can show them just so they can get a visual concept of how big this is. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking for the blue scan right here. Nope, that's the blue-red. Well, there you go. There's the elevations, and somebody must have known that the rooms follow parallel to an existing canal that's there, and these chambers are really big. So I guess I can just show you this little animation here that's showing that the levels don't connect. So it's completely separate, 2 levels, with no snakes and ladders connections between them. So what a lot of people, think is it's going to be like a tomb where you go up and down in between the 2 levels. And so in my mind, this suggests that it's different constructions.
Yeah. And this is a reoccurring theme in Egypt is different stages of the civilization building on top of more ancient structures in order to provide a place marker or to just to guide people to the sacredness of that site. Do you think that this is something that's happening with this site here in Hawar?
Well, I don't think it's a temple. My dog is barking.
That's okay.
Should I go save her?
She's a welcome guest on this show. You know that, Carmen.
Right. You have to. She's going to keep barking unless I go get her.
Yeah, you know, David. They would always build a newer structure over top of an older structure.
Yeah, it's as if maybe that spot, for whatever reason, was known to have something already there, and maybe throughout time there was the older original dig with the setup. And we'll get into Carmen. Oh, hello.
This is Bella.
She's got the best sunglasses in the business, man.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that.
No, Chris and I were just talking, thinking about the way that looks, is you seem to have sort of like the first dig, the first construction. You seem to think that this is more of a practical application, possibly from some pre-Diluvian culture going underground, possibly storing some of their technology, some of their gold, some of their whatever artifacts. And then maybe later on, because it was known that area was used for this, later on there was more added later on. Maybe it could be something totally different. Maybe it could be linked. I mean, we don't know. But what do you think originally this was used for?
It's almost not fair to speculate. And I know that all along I've been, having an issue with Sitchin that, people, 450,000 years ago, we were enslaved. which to me speaks to the idea that we're not enslaved now, but I don't think that's true. They came down from another planet. I mean, really, we really have to piece this together. And people like Klaus Donna and Michael Cremo, who I'm going to be speaking with at the Modern Knowledge Tour, have given us a big gift by helping us go farther back to begin to speculate. And so in some ways, this is incredibly threatening to consider that we may have some kind of record of the really, really old stuff. And I really don't think that it was on the surface at some point and then it got buried.
Yeah.
I think that it was designed to be underground. But if you look at the construction, it's not the same old. It's not a temple with connecting rooms. Like all the temples, there's an entrance, there's a hypostyle hall, you go through, it's replicating the cavities of the body, and you go all the way through to the pineal gland and the Holy of Holies. And in the cosmology and the tradition ideology in Egypt, it was only the highest level initiates that would go further along. And the first level was for, the populace, I suppose. But, it's not the same thing as that. And also, the three areas of the construction are different from one another.
Yeah. Now, would you, just to explore this a little bit further, Carmen, so there's the red level, which is the deepest, the blue level, which is on top of the red level, but below the actual ground level, as we see it today. And then on top of that, there is an actual pyramidal structure. And I guess that would be Old Kingdom, New Kingdom, Egypt. Is there a date for that pyramid?
Okay.
That's on top?
Okay, so red level, blue level, Ptolemaic level, Alexander the Great, Anthony, Cleopatra, Roman level, then the pyramid. Now, there could be a straight-sided pyramid underneath. The pyramid is mud brick. Okay. And so that means it's much, much later, because we know that the better constructions are older and the more modern constructions fall apart. They actually call it the Weeping Pyramid, and they literally made bricks out of mud, and any kind of moisture kind of melts it away, and so it almost looks like tears going down the face, and it's actually rounded. And it used to be 50 meters high, and now it's 46. So it's eroded. But there's also water inside. I just was at the site 6 weeks ago. And so I've got footage, and you throw a stone in and it goes plunk into the water. So a lot of the concern for the excavation would be that the water had seeped into the passageways, and that was going to complicate the excavation. But we did the full scan for water, and apparently the water's underneath the lowest level.
And what's the institutionalized view of the Hawar area? Like, what is the standard saying right now that people? Is there any special significance given to this area in textbook Egyptology that you're aware of?
Well, Flinders Petrie did a dig in 1881 and uncovered the Ptolemaic stuff and the Roman stuff. Now, the wooden sarcophagi that the Roman level has the oldest painted lifelike faces anywhere in the world, apparently. And so they literally would take the face of the person who had passed away and paint it on the foot of their wooden box that they put them in. There's a city called Crocodipolis or something like that, and they were doing a lot. So they found mummified crocodiles. They found quite a few mummified bodies there. And there is an outdoor museum, an open-air museum of things that they have found. But that's all from the two surface areas. It could be there's another pyramid underneath. We don't know.
Wow. So is there any, I guess, agencies trying to block this investigation, Carmen? Do you feel like there's, like, even on the, I mean, I know it's difficult in general to get what you need in order for excavation and all that, and to get on the ground, but have you felt that there's been anything that is purposely trying to block this discovery from coming out?
Yes, there's been a lot of interference patterns. And also in Egypt, I mean, basically, I called him Dr. No. Zahi says, yes, 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 give me all your stuff, and then no, you can't do your work. So in the 30 years that I've been running around Egypt, very little major work has been excavated. They just don't seem to be able to get around to doing it. And there's a 12-page guidelines for the application to the SCA. And the first point is no new permits to excavate will be granted in Upper Egypt and in brackets Giza to Abu Simbel. Well, that's the whole thing. But apparently this site is exempt, and that there really are a lot of people that are looking to do that. But they got the new Zahi, Dr. Rada, is very, very interested in preservation of the mud brick pyramid because he did his PhD research in mud brick pyramids, and this thing is falling apart. So you can see right through some places where the mud is eroded from the top and the bottom, and so it's precariously perched. And again, he seems to, be quite frustrated that nobody wants to, help preserve it, and he's having a lot of trouble with that. And then there's people like Zahi, who's never been to the site. Now, he's not in office anymore, but he unequivocally says there's nothing there. As he does say, there's nothing under the Giza Plateau, which I spent 5 years in and out of the holes there, and, there's something, but most of those passages are blocked. It strikes me that nobody's been in here, specifically on the red level, like Herodotus in 450 BC talked about the blue level, but he didn't. He said he heard about the lower level, but he didn't get in. And so there's lots of stories about this place. I mean, this is no secret. Like, this site is known.
It was just never sure where it was.
Well, they don't know what's underneath. We haven't had the technology to go, and some people think, well, just go in there with bulldozers, and then you get 100 guys with their little leather baskets that they pass on, and that'll take 25 years. That's not how to do it, because you can't put, I don't think, and it's the guy from the National Research Institute agrees, you can't put bulldozers on that sensitive sand. It's just they're too heavy, too awkward. So that also creates a few problems. I know that they have a lot of sand removal equipment. I think that's the way to go, vacuum it. But again, you need permits, and archaeology is a destructive science. So you can't go get it without wrecking it. But that's true for all archaeology, which is why the archaeological record is so precise, because the idea is in 100 years, if somebody gets a better idea of how to interpret it, if you're in charge and responsible, you've got to be able to map the whole thing out, so that it's accurate and somebody else can pick up where you left off without guessing what it used to look like before you started.
Right.
Would you be, sorry, David, would you be inclined to go into a little bit more detail, maybe pull up an image or two of the actual complex itself? And we can just...
So it is 107 acres.
Wow.
Just the area shown here to the edge of where there's stuff. So that's huge. It's 500 meters by 869 meters. It's huge. Which turns out to be 81 football fields. Think about that.
Oh no, the scale's monumental, especially being that it's situated underground.
So 5 of the chambers are bigger than Olympic-sized swimming pools. So I've just been thinking in the last little while, it's like taking an airport and putting it underground.
Yeah.
Well, why? Why would a chamber have to be as big as a pool and be that deep? It's just, and there's both levels have rooms that big. And so all but one chamber is bigger than the average size house, and that one chamber is still bigger than an apartment. I mean, we're talking pretty wild stuff here. So on the blue level, here's the size of the Olympic-sized swimming pools, the pink, peach, and then the pink is the average size house. So look at all these, and the average size apartment is the turquoise in front. There's 31 chambers on the blue level, but they're in a decreasing order. So it looks random, but none of the chambers are the same size. And when you see that the red level follows that, and here's the one chamber that's slightly smaller than the Olympic pool, but these are bigger than the house. But they follow a kind of descending, past, and so it looks random when you first look at it.
Yeah.
But I measured all the rooms off the scan, and then you can see, there's each chamber. So the biggest one on the blue level is 19,580 square feet. I mean, what? Like it's really hard to wrap your mind around it, which is why I'm trying to, put it into metaphors.
Yeah.
Right? And so, I mean, what's this, the size of a grocery store? I mean, 21,409 square feet. And so the exterior area is 81 football fields, 107 acres, but the interior is 9 acres inside. Like, you know, it raises more questions than it answers.
That's right.
But I also think that a really good question is better than a poor answer. You know, like, it's uncomfortable not to know, but I think we all have the propensity. Well, what we see on the news, on television shows, and in school is This is what it is. We know, and it was this day, and this guy built it, and all that stuff. And you know, really, maybe.
Yeah.
So this is raising a tremendous number of questions. And then these purple lines, which are the single passageways, are 1.4 kilometers, 1.488 kilometers of passageways. So what's that about?
It's incredible.
It is incredible.
It's a pre-Diluvian Costco with a bunch of swimming pools.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, exactly. It's like what we have in Toronto here, Dave, with the path downtown, the underground shopping center.
Yeah.
That just snakes all over Toronto.
So this is the other construction, which is on the same level as the blue, but it's smaller rooms. So we have the same metaphor here of the Olympic pools and the house and the apartment. But those passageways on the other side are quite a bit smaller, which speaks to the idea of a different purpose. And yeah, who knows?
Well, it definitely seems that the red and the blue levels, like you said, there's the 2 or 3 big chambers, and then the rest of them follow that nice sloping, decreasing arc down to the smallest chamber. So it almost seems, you know, harmonics might be involved, something of that nature.
Yeah, harmonics.
Well, and that's the first thing I thought when I plotted all this, was that it almost looks like a scale, and there's 32 on one level and 31 chambers on the other. So like major, minor, or I don't know. I mean, we really don't know. And we also don't know if it's like blank walls in there, or if it's decorated. We don't know.
And that's the fun thing, what you were talking about questioning. It's at these early stages that the hypotheses get thrown out there.
Yep.
We start looking at it from all different angles, and it's asking those questions now and then applying that to a proper hypothesis once, you know, you get in there and start digging, and you know, hopefully you get granted access to these sites and get to explore it further.
Well, and I mean, far be it, you know, I've always had one foot on the shore with this, in that, you know, just because it's a phenomenal thing that we think should be excavated doesn't, and we would likely have to pay for it, but doesn't mean they're going to let us. Like, I don't want to be delusional about that.
Right.
But the thing too is that by coming out with it, I mean, as soon as people found out that this was happening, they wanted to take the information and the scans and call them theirs. Yeah. Well, that also isn't right. So in this dog-eat-dog society, and in this milieu that we're in now of pirating everybody's stuff, and Pyramiko going on YouTube 15 minutes after it came out on DVD, you know, like everybody's just taking each other's stuff and saying it's theirs, or, you know, using each other's pictures and, you know, making it look like, you know, not giving copyright. And so I have a real issue with that. And working in the, you know, graduate division of educational research at the University of Calgary for years, and sitting on the committee, PhD committees, candidacy exams, admissions committee, you know, all this stuff is like, if you're going to publish, it has to be done properly. And because people can self-publish, there's this real propensity to say, it's true because I said so.
Yeah.
And that is something I think we really need to be vigilant about and give credit where credit is due. And so it's just amazing to me how people don't care about this aspect. And it weakens everything. You know, like I did notice at Modern Knowledge when I was there in Vancouver, that people were very, very much, and in issues like UFOs, I mean, how do you prove anything? Well, it's like, but everybody was tracing how they knew. So I don't think the audience should ever be left with, how do you know, according to what, you know, or what do you mean? Like, I think it's incumbent upon the speaker to help the audience understand and to trace what they're saying, so the audience goes, oh, I can go look at that up myself.
That's right. You should be able to duplicate.
So that's the platform I'm standing on, and, you know, this is me sharing it first because someone else is coming along to say, no, we found that. So it's unfortunate that life works like that. Totally.
Well, and ultimately it should be about what we're talking about here. This is our history as a species on this planet. You know, we shouldn't continue the line of really fighting over it. We should actually be teaming up and trying to get this done. But like you said, that's not how a lot of people see it. They see this as opportunistic. They see it as a way of boosting their career. There's probably people that even in mainstream archaeology eventually who might not even want to touch this just because it might threaten everything that they've built their foundation on previous in their work. And this has been something throughout archaeology that's been an issue for a long time. So we're in that age where all of these new discoveries are starting to pop up. We're getting new technology to go back and look at things again and have a new analysis of it. And there's all this competing going on, but it's kind of putting everything on its head. Do you feel like it's kind of a chaotic time in the world of, you know, ancient human origins right now?
Well, it is, and there's been a real habit that if something doesn't fit within the 6,000 year time mark, that they bury it again. And Michael Cremo's one to have noticed that, and Klaus Donna as well. Like, they found some really ancient things in Peru, and he took it to a thermoluminescent dating lab, and they came back at 4,280 years or whatever because they don't want it to be older than 5,000 years, and the lab's not allowed to say it is. So they kept this one artifact over a year, and then they didn't charge him. So what do you got? You got a lot of fudging around. So then you have to, get the right lab, and then you got to get the, and so, but it's coming out anyway, and this may be it. This may be the whole enchilada that I've done the calculations of the size of the rooms, had this animation made, and we may not get any further. That doesn't mean that isn't still significant.
Right. Yeah.
So where does it just stand on this actual day, late May 2015, with you and your application to the Antiquities, Egyptian Antiquities Department?
I have a mentor from the National Research Institute that is coaching me in making this application tenable. To have the right level of credentials of the people that are involved that have the characteristics. Now, they've set me on the path of finding the archaeologists, and I've been interviewing some. And like I said, there's rules, lots and lots and lots of rules. But also for me, having studied archaeology at the graduate level, you need people who can think on their feet, who have field experience, who have experience with huge amounts of sand, who understand the cultural patterns, that can say of all the patterns, because a lot of people just go into one field and they're not measuring it over long periods of time in a large area, right? So the trade routes for frankincense and myrrh over 4,000 years in the Arabian Peninsula, the dispersion of pottery technology over 3,000 years. And so someone like that can come in and say, we haven't seen anything like this, right? With unequivocally knowing that. And so I've been interviewing the archaeologists, and I'm about to present to the National Research Institute about who would be best suited. But we have to look for availability and past experience and credibility and know-how, right? So it's intense.
So
and again, pardon?
So even though there was a regime change in Egypt with Zahi Hawass now on the outside, do you see any change in the approach when confronting new ideas about Egypt and about its history with this new and current regime that's in place?
Yep, there's not going to be anybody like Zahi, but you probably saw that thing that went viral, that video about a month ago, did you? When Zahi and Graham Hancock were debating. And that was tied to a trip that somehow Graham was doing, that they were including this site. And they had booked Mena House to do a debate. And it just turned into a shouting match, and Zahi stormed out. And so he still seems to have his finger in a few pies. And he has his kids, which are people that he trained that are in there. So yes, I think it is different. I have met the new Zahi. I think that people are professional and intelligent and interested and all of that, but it's still a government,
You're still going to have that red tape.
And so Yeah, I mean, it's different there. Like when I was there recently, there's a different feel to Egypt. Tahrir Square, we stayed a block off it, and it's got this real feeling of pride. You know, the square is all cleaned up. They put a monument up there about the revolution. But since, I mean, the revolution was all about food prices going up, and up, and the value of the Egyptian pound going down, down, and down. And that's just continued to get worse. So utility bills are 800% what they used to be. But there's certainly nothing like we pay in Canada, because they went from $2 to $16 for electricity a month. $2 a month, I'd like to pay that. Right. So the people are still suffering, and the regime change gave them optimism that they could stand up for themselves. But the truth of the matter is they're still getting crushed financially. Yeah. And the other thing is the price of gas was 10 cents a liter for years and years and years and years and years. And then all of a sudden it corrected to market value. And I couldn't figure out why the traffic was moving so well. And they built a tremendous number of new roads, and they're putting in a magnetic levitation train that the Chinese are building and all that. But the traffic's flowing better because people are leaving their cars parked at home because they can't afford the gasoline.
For the gas, yeah.
So, you know, like, it's better. I think it's better, but it's still a government. I mean, it's still patriarchy.
Yeah, it is, and you're in Egypt quite often. And what does the everyday common Egyptian citizen think of this type of information? Think about their history. Do you know what they're taught in their schools there? Do they have any? Like you mentioned the word pride. Do they have any pride in their history and exploring their history, or they just let the government take care of that for them and pretty much tune it out themselves?
Well, even in the villages right beside in front of the pyramids, you know, like, they don't care. They don't notice. It's not Muslim. If the pyramids on the Giza Plateau hadn't been built the way they were, they'd be gone. Because it was used as an open quarry, and so they don't care, and they're considered un-Islamic, but they can't take the pyramids down even with dynamite. So that's the only reason why they're still standing there. So occasionally you meet somebody who wants to study Egyptology, but Egyptology in Egypt is memorizing scripts. And mostly that's Ramses and fighting, and he warred with this and that and cut off the hands of his enemy, you know, and that's what they say. Yeah. And you know, even Chris Dunn saying all these statues were Ramses, a lot of them were Amenhotep III, who's Akhenaten's father. And, you know, so they just come up with the coin story and repeat it. Yeah. But mostly they're being taught, it's either Coptic Christians or the Muslim, you know, thing. So I don't think they care very much.
Yeah, because it's funny, because I've been in Egypt once. I was lucky enough to get there back in 2003, and it was right around the time the Gulf War was happening, and literally there were 7 other people on our tour. It was empty. All of the ancient sites were empty. It was one of the lowest points in tourism in Egypt in their history. Our tour guide was ex-military. And he did the whole the standard procedure of this is this and this is that and this is, you know, the textbook procedure with us. But then you would get to talk to him on the side, and he would get into this whole hidden history. And it's almost like he knew about it all. And he was willing to actually teach us about that history. But he even told me one day he's caught between what does he think we want to know and what do I really want to know? So he was telling me about Ramses and about Tutankhamun and all that stuff, but he was waiting for me to prompt him on more questions just to see where my interest level was at, and he was more than willing to shed information on a lot of the secret information that you and a lot of other researchers have come forward with. So it almost seems like him being ex-military was almost in on this whole secret. And now that he wasn't in the military and just working for himself as a tour guide, had no problem whatsoever sharing this information with me. Just wanted to know if that's a common experience there that you might have had.
Well, they're not supposed to, though, share it. And they're bound by their degree in Egyptology, and it's very, very strict. So when I led numbers of groups there, and I would always, you have to have the tour guide, the Egyptian tour guide, and I would pay them to be silent. Because the minute they started talking about all that warring stuff, it just turned my stomach. And so it isn't that common that they know. But things like the helicopter and the plane at Abydos, they tell everybody not to show it, not to point it out. So when I go in there with my group and get everybody behind and point to where it is, they go, how do you know that's there? Right? So really, we still live in an age where we're told what to think. And the Egyptian temples speak for themselves. Like if you go and stand, because they're accurately replicating the cavities of the human body, and the pyramids are replicating the whole DNA, and then the planet and the solar system and the galaxy is all kind of a mirror in the quantum physics sense. You can have an experience regardless of what anybody's saying.
Right, yeah.
But if they distract you and say, go look over there, then it doesn't work the same way. And so, no, it's not common knowledge. And tourism has not recovered. It's at 5% of what it was over the years. And I've been going to Egypt since 1977 and steadily, since 94. And so, it used to be where there'd be like 30 buses in the parking lot at the plateau. And, where we're the only plane on the tarmac, last group I led, going to Luxor and back from Aswan, and no buses in the parking lot at Saqqara, which is one of the biggest sites. So it's not recovering because the mainstream media has done so much about, ooh, it's so scary, 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 scary. But it isn't, and the thing is that to me, it's the same old Egypt. It's Egypt, okay. And when you land, they haven't been watching CNN. They don't know that we demonize all things Middle Eastern. They don't listen to our media, and so they don't know we're talking really bad about them. And they're happy and extroverted and wear their hearts on their sleeve. And the minute I get there, I'm like, what a relief, because we're not in this machine, even if you don't watch the news, even if you don't participate in that ideology of them. It's still in the collective. And we live inside that. And to me, it's just such a relief to be outside of that headset.
Yeah.
And that just shows you how much pressure there can be, inside a culture that's trying to get us not to like somebody.
Oh, that's so true. Well, Carmen, do you want to speculate a little bit here about basically if we're putting together the research you've done since you've been to Egypt for the first time, the books you've written, the Pyramid Code, and now looking at this site? I remember you mentioned earlier in one of your presentations, you were talking a little bit about some of maybe the ancient technology they might have been working with. There might have been a reason why they had some kind of an underground system like this. There's probably more as well. Did you want to speculate at all on the connection of this site to your other work and the hypothesis that you have on the history there?
Well, I like the two words hypothesis and speculate. Thank you, because it's not definitive. We'll never know. But to me, it looks like a storage area, especially the blue level, where they had to put their stuff somewhere. And in my past life readings, early on, like all the way back in 73, I was told in a regression that I was on an evacuation committee when we knew that Atlantis was going down. And my understanding from the ancient records is Atlantis had 3 worldwide calamities. And it existed long enough to have golden ages and iron ages and go around the precessional cycle a few times. Yeah? And so there are ancient texts that talk about the heart of the lion hitting the head of the crab. At that point, there would be some kind of a disaster, and that speaks to the constellation of Cancer hitting the constellation of Leo, and that's well documented. That's all over the place, actually. Well, not all over the place, but I've seen it several times, that prophecy. And it also speaks to the idea that the Earth was tilted 14 degrees off, and so all of a sudden it went from being 360 days a year in the Egyptian calendar to 365. And that's what you see, the angles of the Grand Causeways in Egypt in front of the second pyramid, in front of the Great Pyramid, compensating for this 14-degree change that, here came the big flood. So somehow they knew about this. And so if we were in a full-fledged seafaring culture in Atlantis, and the prophecy was that, in 50 years or whatever, this asteroid was going to come and smack into the Earth, if it was us, plus, 10 other people. He said, what are we going to do? How are we going to preserve our stuff? What are we going to do for people? And so, it's been suggested that everywhere there's straight-sided pyramids on the planet, and they're finding more and more of them, that there was something about stabilizing the grid on the planet. And if the world flood happened, that's what happened in Bosnia, then it would deposit all this silt on top, and then plants and trees can grow over the top. So, they're finding them in Serbia, they're finding them all over the place. And so maybe, the decision was to populate the planet, colonize in various places with pyramids, and put the stuff and the technology underground so it wouldn't get flooded. Something like that. However, because older is deeper, that could be what I'm speculating as the blue level. But what about the red level that looks like it's constructed differently again? And somebody knew about it because the passageways underneath are parallel to this canal. And I think that the statement that the canal, was leaking, so we can't go down there, has all been part and parcel of keeping this stuff down there and hidden. So if it's so much deeper, then the next level that doesn't look the same would be even older. And so again, because everything in patriarchy is squished into 5,000-6,000 years, we don't know how to think that through. And I think that's one of the realistic positive effects of the Pyramid Code, was that it gave a map of going further back. But we even are further back than that. And so for you, with all the, ETs, I mean, one of my convictions with that too is that, we imagine them in spaceships, and that's been fed to us. I mean, there's the storylines that keep getting repeated, but we're all in our little cars, scooters, whatever. And so we're all about vehicles. So we imagine that they would have that, even though they can shapeshift in and out. But if there was a civilization that star-seeded us from a long time ago, how would they have adjusted to the different atmospheric conditions, the densification of being here? How would they have adjusted to being on the planet? Well, I'm speculating that they needed these exceedingly large chambers as part of the orientation to being on the planet. Now, that is as far-fetched as anything, and I don't even want to think that, but what could it be, and why so incredibly huge?
Yeah, and that's what you're talking about there, about the extreme human antiquity. Yourself, through the Pyramid Code, the work of Dr. Robert Schoch, redating the Sphinx complex, the Giza Plateau, pushing this back to, something happened on Earth about 12,500 years ago. This is the end of the last ice age. I've been recently interested in the mechanisms of the decline of that last ice age, and there's an event that people are calling, researchers are talking about, called the Younger Dryas event, where they think that an actual comet came in over North America, instantaneously vaporized the continental ice shelf, that huge mile-high ice sheet that covered all the way down to the Canada-US border. And I'm just wondering, a lot of your work, a lot of the work of other Egyptologists, the work and the research gone into the Dogon tribes of Africa, it seems that astronomy and the recording and the calculations and the documenting of the motions of the stars goes well back in our antiquity. And what's to say that on your hypothesis here about these being storage areas, what's to say that if these things are actual, like you said, storage areas for an event that they knew was going to happen because of those astronomical calculations and observations that they were making? So it's almost like a bomb shelter of sorts, that they knew that something was going to happen around 12,500 years ago. Whether or not they saw this comet come in, that was the catalyst for the decline of the ice age and the flood itself. So I'm just throwing that out there, that maybe their advanced technology was advanced enough to actually predict this event and to prepare for it. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So whether the Atlanteans themselves knew it was going to happen and made the necessary preparations. I'm sure there'd be a lot of their citizenry that wasn't prepared for it, but maybe a select few that had the means, that had the knowledge, did make preparations for that event.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. At the elite, evacuation committee, everybody's not going to be on par with that. But then, and we're piecing a lot together through what they're finding at the Bosnian pyramids. And so we talk about Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, all of that. And one of the most interesting finds was this bone that a young bear bone that was drilled with holes, and they saw it as an instrument, but nobody could play it. And then somebody from the Bosnian Philharmonic Orchestra put it in his left hand, and he was able to get 4 octaves out of it, and I've got footage of him playing it. And so the idea of a left-handed culture being matriarchal, right brain dominant, but the idea too that, if it was us, if we had a disaster, we wouldn't be able to stay in our houses. We would have to go and make fires in caves. We're here on using technology right now, but from 1 minute to the next, that grid could go down, and then we're walking around and using, animal skins. And it's not that we're stupid. We lost our stuff. The grid went down. And so what would they have started? Where is Sirius? Where is Orion? And of course, they were all about that because they didn't have cities that had lights that blocked out the stars. And if they were seafaring, and that's certain, and even the boats on the Giza Plateau are watermarked. They say it's for the king to go to the stars, but why has it got water? And of course, everything's dried up, so they put the boats underground. But, to navigate through the stars is an art, and to understand astronomy, astrology, all of that, even to speak in their prophecies using the constellation of Leo and Cancer, speaks to the idea that this was really important to them.
Yeah,
and so I think we've misinterpreted even the Neanderthal, thinking they were stupid and dragging women around by their hair with a club. It's like, I don't think that was it. I think that the grid went down.
Yeah.
And the really smart people ended up compromised.
And I think, David, maybe you'd want to comment on this. Carmen, we just got back from Ireland, and we did a full tour of Ireland of all the megalithic sites. And it seems, again, David, this theme of starting over, that's happening here in our hypothesis here with Egypt. We also experienced that in Ireland.
Yeah, no, it was truly amazing to go around. I'm glad we hooked up with James Swagger there. He took us all over. He did pretty much a private tour for Chris and I. We saw a ton of stone circles, ruins, got into a couple castles even, but the stone circles and the monuments and the alignments, and he was explaining it, the fact that they were using quartz crystal, the fact that they understood where these standing stones should go to mark these different movements of planets and stars, and how accurate they are, going even down to Newgrange. And they did a little reenactment there of how the sun hits on the solstice and the equinox. And it's just, when you get into some of these ancient places, and I plan on doing more, trust me, I'm just getting warmed up, but the more you get into these places, the more you start to see the level of care and planning and intuitive understanding and artistic rendering that is embedded in these places. And then just, Chris, you had that feeling too when we're standing in Newgrange and they turn the lights off. The energy in there, it's indescribable. It really is.
Yeah. And that just goes to say what Carmen was commenting on there. If the megalithic builders of Ireland and the tomb, quote unquote tomb builders of Egypt, if they all came from a pre-Diluvian race, and this is just their attempt at reconstruction of their civilization with what they had to work with after this cataclysm happened.
Or, pardon me, these megalithic sites could have been put there before with the weight of them. And Graham Hancock brought us that idea of heaven's mirror, and every 72 degrees, if you think about the slices of an orange, didn't matter what the latitude was, that there was something that was stabilizing the grid. But also, to get realistic dating techniques, and carbon-14 falls down, but even with that, because at 30,000 years, it starts to be plus or minus 5,000 or more than that. It really becomes inaccurate. But Dr. Sam found some organic material, and they're talking 38,000 years ago. So now we have pyramid energy meeting megalithic stone structures in matriarchal times.
Yeah, yeah. And
Like-
Göbekli Tepe falls into that as well.
Göbekli Tepe, and the other thing was that it and the Bosnian pyramid tunnels were decommissioned because they had foreshadowing of the flood. So they were preserving, it seems obvious that if they decommissioned the thing, that they wanted to preserve it, for future times. And Göbekli Tepe was not a residence. They're not finding pottery and cooking fires and any of that. This was up on a hill, 22 temples, animal symbolism for astrology, all of that, astronomy, whatever. But all of that is consistent. And so, once we wipe our patriarchal lenses clean and start looking, the picture that we've been taught is just not quite right. And I think one of the biggest problems is that, in between there, that they were stupid. But Graham Hancock in his novel really brought that point forward too. That, and the other thing is about spanning the past lives. So the front of the book looks like now with the distant, Neanderthal upside down, and the back of the book is the other way around. And each chapter is going back and forth between the times, and at the end you realize that it's the same person. Oh, did I just give the plot away? Sorry. but the point of the matter is that's us. And so the other methodology for them shutting any of this down was that, you only live once. And so, I just can't buy that, because I wouldn't be, I'm all about this place because I was looking for it for so long. Like something inside me knew that there's something about it, but also I've been listening to a lot of people who channel, and that's not scientific per se, but it is, qualitative in terms of perceptions. And I've had several people talk to me about going through these passageways where it would light up as they went through, and the doors were blocked, and there were symbols on the doors, and those sorts of things. And so we haven't talked about the symbols on the copper engraving from 1670.
Yeah, let's get into that, because that's really
I'm just
interesting.
looking for the picture now.
And we don't know who did it, right? We just
Yes, but I can't say his name.
Oh, okay.
Lesplixius or something like that.
Okay.
He's got the weirdest name going. So I just remember
Does
that
he have a copyright on that?
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
copper plate engraving. Here we go. And if you really need to know his name, I can and text it to you. But I just blurt it out. So in the center of this is a square, and inside it, it's all at once. And a friend of mine who's highly psychic looked at this and she said, it's all at once: a pyramid, a brain, and a labyrinth. Okay, and so if this indeed is a labyrinth that we're talking about at this location, apparently the labyrinth on Crete was visited. This labyrinth was visited by the designer of the other labyrinth, and there's a lot of mysteries that go with that. But if you got on a raft at Alexandria, you'd hit Crete, right? You wouldn't even have to navigate your way. It's just over there in the Mediterranean with nothing in between. And so there's something about the metaphor of that, and what does it mean, and the hemispheres of the brain, and the pyramid somehow replicating the human experience, the physicality of DNA. That there's something, and that it just keeps going from human to solar to Earth to solar system to galaxy, and that these principles are replicated. And so I think we accept that the ancients had high knowledge, but if you look at the sophistication and the variety of these squares, and then the archetypal energies that go along the outside, there's all kinds of different beings here. And then there's something that looks like biology in the feminine sense and biology in the masculine sense. And so to me, this is code. And I feel really comfortable with it. When I see it, I feel like my being settles down, and it's like, yeah, I know what this is. I don't know what I know, but it feels like it's connecting on a very deep level. Yeah, now, apparently, whoever made this was copying something that they saw down there. 1670 is a long time ago.
It strikes me as a mandala, and a mandala is a Hindu or Buddhism symbol, ritual symbol representing the universe. Could this be like an ancient mandala of some sort?
Absolutely, but I think that it's categories of different symbology. I think it's code. It's some kind of code.
That's why they're all
And so-
sectioned off here.
Yes, and my friend who had the experience of flying through the chambers and them lighting up, she suggested taking each of these blocks and turning it into a 3D and then looking at it. She even said 5D. And so she wants to take the whole thing and look at it. We haven't done that yet, but I think each square, is its own interesting bit.
Well, that actually comes from the movie Contact. If you ever watch that movie, they get a message from ET and they're trying to decipher it with their right brain, and they're looking at it in 2 dimensions. And what it did was it took someone to take that 2-dimensional image and fold it into 3 dimensions, and then the key was found. The actual primer was found to decipher the whole entire message by just folding that paper in and on itself.
Well, let's do it, Carmen. You're going to decipher the code that is going to bring us back to our roots here.
Our next lesson will be origami.
Yeah.
And I've been waiting, for somebody to do it for me. And then I'm thinking, okay, why don't I just cut it up myself and figure out how to use yet another program and just do it. But still, I think it's profound, super sophisticated, and then very simple at the same time. But so are pyramids. Super sophisticated and very simple all at the same time. But they're meaningful in that they're replicating something inside us, And so, the ancients weren't stupid. I don't know how handy it is to think they were, but and the other thing I keep thinking, back to the idea that we're sitting around the committee, the evacuation committee, like if we were way back and we knew that everything was going to go to the situation we're in right now, where ignorance reigns, stealing is acceptable, and the truth is optional, and all of that. And we were to leave something for ourselves to be triggered, what would we leave? Like, if it was up to the 3 of us, and I suppose other people on the committee, and we had this high knowledge, and it was known that we were going to go into this bloodbath, blood from death, darkness, enslavement of all humanity and financial messes and all that, what would we leave? Right? I think that's a really profound question.
I love how you phrase that. It's almost like, I would leave art. That's what I would leave, because a picture has 1,000 words. You can cram so much information, and it's also, like you said, art is a reflection of your soul almost. So is the pyramid. So is those structures. Everything in Egypt, like you said before, in the work of Schwal Deluich and John Anthony West, they're showing that these physical monuments and these structures are 3-dimensional imagery of a higher dimensional plane that's contained within inside of us. And so is this image here. And like you, Carmen, I'm mesmerized when I'm looking at this image. And it's almost like there's an inner knowing when you look at this image. So it does have a profound impact on one's psyche.
Well, and you can stare at it for a long time and see something new. And the beings that are walking along the outside edge are varied. There's a lot of different kinds of beings with different heads, but you see that all the time in Egypt anyway. But and the thing is, though, is that I don't think this doesn't look like anything that I've seen in Egypt before, though it does feel like something that's familiar. So that's why I keep looking at the different levels and the different layers of time. But the other thing is the third-party hypothesis. So if the Mayans and the East Indians and the Egyptians and all these different places, Sumerian, have this similar narrative of the past, but they weren't in a position to speak to one another, perhaps they all had the same ancestors that taught them about these other places and these other dimensions or who knows what. And so they all had similar ancestors, including the Atlanteans. And so we know that Egypt sprung into form, fully fashioned, and then deteriorated. And so that's why if the pyramid's falling apart, the mud brick pyramid, it's because it's newer, right? And the joke of this site that wasn't this was that it was probably 30 years old and it was falling apart. That's us, right? The age of plastic. And so, yeah, and these secrets fit together, and I think that you two are really bringing together a huge community of people across Canada and, speakers from the States and other places, which to me is a meeting of the minds, and not trying to convince people of anything.
Right.
Because people come to these sessions wanting to be fed, more things that connect all these different places. And so, this is where technology is really bringing us together.
Right, and that's really our hope with Modern Knowledge and the upcoming tour in August, where we want to try to bring some different perspectives this time around. We've covered a lot of different subjects on our previous tours and events, but I think August is, I'm so excited for August because of the fact that we've got pretty much a focus on human origins and human consciousness when you think about it. We got Nassim Harriman coming in to bring the
Sorry.
whole quantum physics element. We have Alex Gray and Alison Gray coming in to talk about the multi-dimensional levels of human consciousness and how art affects consciousness. You've got someone like Marty Leeds getting into the old numerology, symbolism, comparative religion, going back and digging up some beautiful pieces of information about how connected we are, the golden mean ratios, etc. And then your work and Michael Cremo's work, and we've got just a great cast of people. And when you put it all together, I think that the picture that's going to be formed for people is literally going to be unprecedented, and it'll give them something to go home with, to look up on their own. And I wondered if maybe you could leave a little teaser for people. I know you're going to be talking a little bit more about in depth on this, but what exactly you're going to be throwing their way when tour comes for Vancouver and Victoria this year.
Well, I'm in production of the next documentary series because so many people have been looking for more pyramid code things, and I'm connecting a number of different places where there's new pyramids, and they're being found. So, and I'm keynote on a trip to Java and Indonesia, going to some of these sacred sites, Borobudur and whatnot. So it's more connecting of these ancient sites, how the pyramids fit together. It's just the progress that we're making, and to be able to show it in a sophisticated, high definition way. So more.
Yeah, and I love the way, and David, you brought it together really eloquently in your last statement, and it goes on my respect for Carmen and her work. And Carmen, like your whole theory, the whole way you go about your work, and always mentioning the matriarchy and the patriarchy aspects of our existence. In today's modern technology, the age of plastic, as you put it, that for me, that's the scientific age doesn't really marry well with the intuitive knowing that we all have. And I just love your work because you're not afraid to go out there outside the boundaries of science itself and bring in that intuitive aspect to your work. And I think that actually goes a long way in breaking down that patriarchal paradigm that we currently exist in. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Well, and people think that matriarchy is the opposite of patriarchy, where, women are going to control men and drag them around by their hair. But that's just not the deal at all. Like, I think we're going to come to see the last 5,000 years as a patriarchal hiccup, which is a failed experiment of what happens if you lop off the balance, lop off the sacred feminine, because we need the balance. And so, I was interviewed the other day, and somebody said, well, don't we need a little bit of evil just for good measure? And I'm like, I'm about done with evil, if you don't mind. It doesn't mean we're not challenged and we're not, looking to become more conscious. But
done that.
we're in a crisis of values.
Yeah.
And I said that. That was the last thing I said at the Modern Knowledge Tour last year. And people just went, yeah. I mean, that's like when truth is an option, we're in trouble.
Yeah. No, we should be living right from that core. And interesting about the whole masculine feminine principle. When you look at it, you have obviously the positive and negative sides of both, and there's been imbalances in both areas, and you can see that even in pop culture. I mean, just looking at the way women are being addressed and viewed and itemized and almost brought forward as some kind of a sacrificial corpse. This is the symbolism coming out of Hollywood and pop music and whatnot, a very negative view of femininity, as opposed to bringing the beauty from these ancient bodies of knowledge that will help re-inspire the positive feminine act. And I think, and I was speaking actually to some Michael about this, Michael Tessarian, and he believes that it's going to be the positive femininity, the positive feminine side that is going to literally save the planet. The masculine side can't do it alone. We're kind of got our hands tied in a way, and we need that maternal, positive female energy that will actually be what is going to create that more positive space for us in the future. So your work really does dovetail into that, and especially when you're going back to Egypt and back to these ancient sites and looking at it with fresh eyes again. And now that we can do it with technology and hopefully get some more insight from these discoveries and from even this discovery, that it might indeed, whether we can dig it up or not, it might indeed start a new sphere of consciousness and a new sphere of awareness that we can use to navigate as we look at other sites and dig up our past more. And I think that we can get out of this historical amnesia, and maybe that's going to be another big thing that'll help set us free in our present time.
Well, consider this. In matriarchal culture, okay, the men sought out the women because they don't have the cycles. And so for men to be connected to cycles, they need to connect to the woman who's having the cycle. And the highest form of DNA is menstrual blood. And so blood from life was the essence, and that's what made the harmony. But the women would start to flow together, and then they would go into these dream circles in the hypogeum and various places underground, and they would dream together. So the rooms were big enough to put their heads together literally and to lie, and they would collect their menstrual blood, and they would use it on the fields for fertilization and in rituals. So the Virgin Mother Crone were the three aspects of that: white, red, and black. And that's the triple goddess. Okay, so everything was working within that. Well, when the patriarchy took over, they were still wearing, the high hat, the red, white, and black, and the dress. But then they started sacrificial lambs, blood from death, and sublimated that we don't just die and get reborn, because the Egyptians didn't even have a word for death. And so we sublimate this whole aspect of death being like being reborn into the arms of the great cosmic mother. Which you're being born into your next phase of what you're doing. We've sublimated all of that. So now we just have this obsession with death. Blood, dead, killing, dead, blood from death. Yeah. So anytime you see blood sacrifices, it's on the other side of the blood from life, which is completely different.
It's
the baby can be born inside it.
Yeah. It's worse than just a misinterpretation of those older understandings of what those, particular rituals or rites of passage were used for. It was a manipulation of it, in my view, in the same way that when you look at religion, there's obviously those positive qualities to these different religious texts and ideas and teachings, but they siphoned that out of those positive traditions from which they were originated, and then later it got bastardized and changed into this idea of, well, our religion is superior, or our ritual has to be about physical death and blood and sacrifice, as opposed to understanding, a connectivity and a maternal earth mother or whatever. So there's been a distortion, really, either way. Historically, there's been a distortion. Some people call it the Great Schism. Some people think that it was because of the ancient cataclysms, and there must have been a few, but because of these cataclysms that literally fractured our genetic memory, our consciousness in a way. And then the priests of old that, they basically just took advantage. They took advantage of that and started, keeping the direction going of control, of, more of a negative patriarchy, of ruling and kings and queens and priests, etc. So we're in this process now, and I don't think maybe a lot of people understand what we're a part of in the modern day, but we are in the space of remembering all of this, not just the good, happy parts, but even the negative stuff too, so that we can deal with this trauma. And that we can put these puzzle pieces together to really get a handle on the present. Because we're not going to be able to survive another type of event like what our ancestors must have gone through, if that comes, if we haven't been able to put the pieces together from the past. So I think that the work you're doing, Carmen, and so many other people of really trying to get in there, keep hypothesizing, keep theorizing, keep throwing everything we can at it, because it's what is necessary for us to make headway. So I personally am very much looking forward to your presentation coming up in August.
Well, thanks. And I'm really looking forward to doing it because the audience is so rich, if you will, even if we're not rich in our pocketbooks, we're rich mentally.
That's right.
yeah, there's a lot going on, and I just want to put a little, caveat on what we've done here today, because, the whole idea is you're supposed to keep everything secret and you're not supposed to share, and then people can come and take your stuff and say it's theirs. And I feel like I'm way out on a limb sharing this with you now, because by August, maybe it wouldn't have been as sensitive information. But this whole thing that we have to hide everything, we're not supposed to tell, we're not supposed to share. And, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't have a gag order on myself, as I said earlier, but, the whole hush hush, and are you going to get in trouble if you tell? And is it going to prevent you from being able to go do the dig because you tell? And there's a part of me that has really felt pushed this week to just come out with it. And I realize I do have a lot of support in this community, and a lot of respect, and I appreciate that a lot, from the two of you and from quite a few other people. And so, but this whole thing is really nerve-wracking, because there's a lot of interference patterns. There's a lot of, who's listening and who's listening to our conversations, and, you can't send these documents because somebody's going to find out what we're doing. And it's just, that burden of that. I mean, now I've got the burden of truth, I suppose, because, I don't know who's going to, have their, toes stepped on, but this is my work, together with Klaus, and the measurement of the rooms, and the finding somebody who could do the 3D animation and that sort of thing. It's not theirs, it's mine, right? And so it's unfortunate that I have to stand on a rooftop and say so, but, it's not fair out there sometimes.
Well, I definitely appreciate your honesty, your integrity here in presenting this information, Carmen. It's there, as they always say, there's always a reason for things to happen, and this happened today for a reason. And definitely, I'm speaking for myself here. I've gotten a lot out of this conversation on multiple levels. I'm still staring at this image right here that you have up on the screen, which is absolutely mind-blowingly awesome. So just on behalf of myself, I just wanted to thank you for your efforts, the work that you've put into this project, and we just hope that we can support you down the road as much as you need. When it comes to furthering this investigation into this underground labyrinth complex that you've so eloquently talked about today with us. So if there's anything you need, please do not hesitate to ask.
Well, I'm going to be launching an Indiegogo campaign, which is to finish the editing and the few shoots that I still need to do in order to be able to put out the next series. And so, the truth is that the Pyramid Code went up on YouTube, and I've made like 20% back of what I spent. And that's also not right, to work. None of us should be working for free.
That's right.
While a few people get super rich on our backs, so that's all. I mean, we're all in the same boat, and like I said, we can be rich of heart and rich of mind.
And hopefully, we can eventually be able to fund our own projects and get some good people involved so we can get this work out. I mean, that's really what the goal is. So we'll keep going forward, and thanks a lot for your time and for choosing us, Carmen, for a platform to bring this information out. It's an honor, and I definitely look forward to seeing you. We're about 2 months away, and can't wait. It's going to be a great event, and I'm so glad you're a part of this tour.
Me too. And all the best to you in your preparation, and thanks for your trust.
Great. Thank you, Carmen.